Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 90s. My voice is a little off today, it's because I'm getting over being sick. My almost yearly get sick on every holiday, Thanksgiving, and you see what happened with that, where was in the hospital with a bad respiratory infection and then out, and then the next week in there with the stupid eye thing. This time I was sick on Christmas, but it was hardly anything. I mean, not hardly anything, but compared to the other one. But my voice is a little, I don't know, raspy or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, who cares about that? We're not now. We're back in the days where I didn't get sick every Christmas. We're going back for episode 59, all the way back to January of 1996. Let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Now, if you guys don't know the format of this podcast, I'll pick a random year and month from the 90s, and I'll do kind of a deep dive into it. I remember I was looking at my first podcast the other day, and I was like, one of the first things I said is like, I'm going to try to get this to about a half hour. Like, I wouldn't be able to even get to a half hour. And then look at it now, I struggle to keep it under an hour and a half sometimes, which I know is a lot to ask people to listen to or watch. So I'm sorry I don't try to drag it out. It's just I get rambling, because what I do is I have a set list of topics that I talk about every, sports, TV, wrestling, because I'm huge into wrestling, different things that come out in fast food. A segment I started about halfway through it, which is one of my favorite ones on here, is to look at the kids' meal toys, more commonly known as Happy Meal toys. But anyway, I have a list of topics. And then I'll talk about some memories of the stuff, and, because I'll give facts of it too. I'm not going to sit here and blindly go into stuff. I'll do a little bit of research, but not like, this isn't a autobiography or some kind of encyclopedia. I'm just looking up some facts and talking about some memories of it and all that stuff. That's why I won't be talking about a bunch of things I don't know about. Like, if a movie comes out that month, and I've never seen it, I'm not going to talk about it. Anyway, that's pretty much the format of this if you've never seen it before. We do a bonus episode. I always say we, is like there's other people. There's like a whole staff behind this. You can tell it's one person. Anyway, got a bonus episode that comes out every month where I can just talk about one topic and it not be like just set in the 90s. I mean, a lot of it does happen in the 90s, just as a rule of thumb with most of the stuff I talk about, but it doesn't have to stay there. Just released one this past Saturday where I read a book I wrote about 14 years ago, or not 14 years, about 10 years ago, whatever it was, 2014, when, I don't know, these years go by too quickly anymore. But anyway, it was a book about experience at my grandma's house at Christmas. It was a really fun podcast to do. Next month's bonus episode will be on January 26th. It'll be the last Saturday of the month. And I believe that last Friday of the month, sorry. I believe that might be the day before the Royal Rumble. Which, if you don't know anything about, that's a wrestling event. But, I got this suggestion from one of my friends on there. Because I didn't know what I was doing for January for the bonus episode. But they suggested talking about PWI magazine, which is Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. And I've talked on here before about my exploits of shoplifting and getting caught with specifically stealing those magazines, which I'm not proud of, but it's part of the story. But I'll be telling that again on this bonus episode. But really, going to a more deep dive, not exactly like super deep, like history of the magazine or anything, just my history with and not just PWI magazine, but I think the first magazine I ever got, sorry not to talk about all this on here, but was probably WCW's magazine. But I'll be talking about that, the WWF magazine, Raw magazine, WOW magazine, all those. But just, yeah, if you're a fan of wrestling magazines, give that one a watch and comment on there some of your favorite magazines or if you remember specific issues. But anyway, that's January 26th. This is today. Whenever you watch this, these come out Wednesday. At least I try to. But anyway, we're going to get into this now. One of my favorite things, of course, is Goosebumps books from the 90s. You can't beat those. Of course, my love with horror books started with, of course, watching Stephen King movies. My dad had me watching Creepshow at a young age. I told that story where he told me his real name was Ed Harris and he was an actor just to mess with me. But, yeah, so horror fan right from the beginning. But obviously I wasn't reading Stephen King books in school because I wouldn't have been able to even, comprehend all the words in those books, even though I can watch the movies and understand it. Reading that kind of level is a little difficult when you're... I mean, when 12 though, I started reading Stephen King at this age. But when I started like elementary school, first thing you read with horror books, if you're my age, was probably the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series. And I'm still going to talk about that series, but I haven't yet. But Goosebumps, of course, came along and just blew up. I mean, created a whole franchise, just, the books and then the TV series. We were all nuts over that. But anyway, the book that came out this month for Goosebumps was number 39, and it was How I Got My Shrunken Head. Really good book. The episode wasn't as good. The TV episode wasn't as good, but it was one of those ones that was a two-parter, so, they put a lot of emphasis in it. It was actually the beginning of season 4, I believe. But yeah, the book was a lot better than the show. I know you sometimes get that with, especially speaking of Stephen King, the books are always better than the movies, usually. I mean, I still like Pet Sematary, the book, better than the movie, but that's not to say that the movie was bad at all. I mean, the movie's a classic, minus the stupid reboot. The second one was, it was fine. It was, I liked it for what it was. But, it was, clearly not Stephen King related. It's just sat there and went kind of crazy. That's fine. And the prequel Bloodlines, I kind of like that too. But anyway, I'm not even talking about Pet Sematary right now. That ought to be one of my bonus episodes. I've already got one mapped out for October of this coming year for, for Halloween. My top horror franchises. But maybe for our bonus episode, I just do a deep dive into Stephen King books. Just talking about them, not like a, just giving brief history of, my experience with it and, what I know about it. I'm not going to, I could probably I would say I could probably do a Stephen King podcast, but I'm not as knowledgeable as some. There's a lot of those out there that go really deep dives on those, and those are enjoyable to watch. I'm not as much of a research person, because I like to just kind of give my feelings on things. Probably why this podcast isn't that popular. But if you ever see, if it ever pops up on anybody's page as an interest, give this a watch and give me some comments if you want. I ramble a lot, as you can tell. I just spent about 10 minutes talking about Stephen King when I was just really trying to talk about Goosebumps. But anyway, let's move on to movies. There was a couple movies that were released this month. I didn't see them in theaters. But I mean, this one in particular I remember just because of the weird title of it. And then I can't remember how we seen it. It's probably on TV, because I don't think this would have been something... Marky Foe, if you don't know, the evil stepdad from hell. His name was Mark. We called him Marky Foe. I still don't know why. I don't think I ever figured out why we called him that. I guess he was our foe. But anyway, this crazy titled movie. It's normally now just referred to as Don't Be a Menace. But the full title is Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood. And it's one of the movies where they're like, I can't remember exactly, but there's drugs and stuff in it. And rap music. And those are two things that I'm definitely not into. But me and my brother still watch this, and as we called it back then, laugh to the death. It was one of our stupid things we always said, and it says we just laughed a lot. We laughed to the death. But yeah, just the title of that alone probably is what made us watch it. But like I said, they normally shorten that when people talk about it or anything, just because it's such a long title. But another movie that was released, which I hadn't seen until a few years ago, and it's just crappy, and I can't believe they made a sequel to the crappy movie, but Lawnmower Man 2, Beyond Cyberspace. Speaking of Stephen King. Actually, I shouldn't say speaking of Stephen King, because this has nothing to do with Stephen King. Stephen King wrote a short story called The Lawnmower Man, and I can't remember what, it was in one of his short story collections, which those are great too. If you love his novels, if you're into short stories, I mean, he does a really good job of, I mean, I don't know which I like better, the Stephen King novel or Stephen King short story collection. But anyway, and he's got a bunch of those too. But anyway, he wrote this story called The Lawnmower Man. And if you ever seen the Lawnmower Man movie, it is not that. It had nothing to do with stupid computers and stuff. It's about just this crazy guy, and he's like mowing the grass, and he's like naked. I can't remember exactly all the stuff, but it's crazy. But maybe it's a good thing that didn't get made into the movie, but the Lawnmower Man movie was just, it's cheesy, but it's one of those ones that's like so bad, it's good, like cheesy wise, like ones you expect to see on Tubi. It's probably on there. But yeah, about this guy who's like, it's got Pierce Brosnan in it, so it's got a big actor in it, but he's like, he creates this computer program, and his, like, I guess the simple-minded is the nice way to put it. There's a mentally handicapped guy named Job is his neighbor, and he's mentally handicapped. So this guy, Pierce Brosnan's character, that created this computer model, he's going to use it. It's like, let's say AI. It's like, oh god, I can't. Virtual reality. AI is everywhere now. It's on my head. I thought that's what it was called. Now, virtual reality, VR. There. Anyway. Yeah, he uses VR, and he makes this guy smart, and the guy becomes, like, too smart, and, like, he goes from this nice guy to this, like, evil guy, and at the end, he puts himself in the computer. So that's pretty much what this second movie is Job in the computer messing with people, and it's crazy. Like I said, the second one that came out this month is called Lawnmower Man 2, Beyond Cyberspace. And really the only connection of why it was called Lawnmower, because they had to put something about a lawnmower, is because he cuts grass and he's good at fixing lawnmowers. They're like, Stephen King. Well, we're gonna take this. We don't want it to have anything to do with this story. We want to make this weird computer story, so we're just gonna take this and we gotta fit lawnmowers in it somehow. Oh, he fixes lawnmowers. There we go. Like, this is so stupid. But anyway, moving on. Talk about something that I never actually even tried. One of my favorite things, as you can tell, in fast food, is from McDonald's, is probably a Big Mac. No onions, because I hate freaking raw onions. Although I've decided that not decided, but if someone's ever gotten me like a cheeseburger and has the onions on it, I'll eat it, like the little tiny ones from McDonald's, but that's about it. But anyway, I always get those taken off of there. But anyway, everybody knows the Big Mac. I can't do the song off the top of my head, but the two all beef patties, they had to put all beef as opposed to what, all raccoon. But the two hamburger patties and the special sauce, which people are always debating whether it's Thousand Island dressing or this or that. I don't know exactly. It's good, but the lettuce, the cheese, and what separates it from just, a big burger with some sauce is the middle bun, which I don't know if it's necessary, but anyway, Burger King decided this time that, because everybody always copies everybody, Burger King's going to come out with their own version. They called it the Burger King Double Supreme at first, and they started testing it in January of '96. And they had their own special King sauce, which was supposed to be like the Big Mac sauce. Like I said, I never tried it, so I didn't know. It eventually came out as the Big King, and it was out until 2009, and it got discontinued then. It may be in some restaurant. You know how that is. Sometimes stuff's discontinued, but it's still there at some restaurants. Like I said, never got to try that, but I never even seen many ads for it, so it must not have been that big of a thing. Let me know if you've had a Big King and tell me how it compares to a Big Mac. And if it was better, it sucks because it's gone. Obviously, Big Mac won that war. But anyway, we're going to talk about music now. Music's a huge part of my life. Last week, I was in the what month was it? I can't remember what month I was in last week when I did the podcast, but I spent a couple weeks doing 1999. And like I said, I do it randomly, so it's not like I chose to do that. I think it was March. Yeah, it was March last week of 99. And I was talking about how I was just like in a different headspace and started to listen to pop music when all my life I'd only listened to country music. Well, January 96, I definitely was not listening to pop at all. But for music, I do like to give some differing viewpoints. I don't know if viewpoints is the right word, but I do like to talk about the pop music that was number one for that month, even though I may not have listened to it. Number one was like a monster song. It was One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men. And I've talked about on here before about Boyz II Men, massive like hits, like 12, 14 weeks straight at number one. There was one time when they had the number one song for like 12 weeks, and the next song they came out with literally took their top spot from them. That's how big they were in the 90s. But I'd never heard this song. Mariah Carey, of course, everybody now associates her with the freaking Christmas song. That annoying thing. They drug her back to hell apparently now. They'll thaw her out next year. I don't get that. Like, if she's going back to hell, then how is she frozen? Anyway, this song was so huge. It was number one for the whole month of January, the whole month of February, 3 weeks of March, and was also number one back in December the previous year. So it's been a grand total of 16 weeks straight at number one. I mean, that is huge. And then back then, to contrast that, of course, I was listening to country music, and I always listen to the American Country Countdown every Sunday morning with Bob Kingsley. Man, I miss his voice on the radio. I miss listening to the radio, but that has more to do with I can't stand any genre of music these days because it's all the same. There's no more genres of music. It's all one, and it's all garbage. Anyway, that's my commentary on the recent music that I always give. But anyway, on the American Country Countdown, it was, they didn't have, like, with the pop music, these 12, 15 week runs at number one. There's a lot of competition for these songs. But number one for the first week of March, I'm back to next week's podcast. I mean, last week's. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Anyway, number one for the first week of January in 1996, and technically the first week of the year, was a song by Brian White called Rebecca Lynn. I believe this is his first song. If it wasn't his first song, it was definitely his first number one. And just a sweet song about like a childhood, let's say romance. That sounds weird to put with childhood, but a childhood, relationship. These kids, they love each other in first grade or whatever it is. No, it was second grade. I was trying to remember the lyrics of the song. But, you know how that is. Not many people end up with their elementary school girlfriend or boyfriend. But, sometimes it works out. And this is one of those songs, you follow them through high school and then they got married. It's just a sweet song. And then number one for the rest of the month for 3 weeks was Faith Hill, It Matters to Me. And, man, that's a great song. I miss when Faith Hill sung like this. Her and Tim McGraw's voices both changed almost as soon as they got married. She definitely went more pop, which I don't mind some of her pop stuff. But I miss, if you look this song up, It Matters to Me, and then you look up something she came out with like 2002, completely different sounding. You wouldn't even think it was the same person. But yeah, I miss when she sung like this, and that was definitely a great song. Of course, this was around the time her and Tim McGraw got together, and 96 was a huge year for both of them. They went on that the tour together called the Spontaneous Combustion Tour. But like I said, I wish their voices hadn't changed. Tim McGraw still sounds a little country, but it's changed a little, and definitely his music has changed, if not his voice. But I wish they were back to doing what they did really well back, especially during this time period. But anyway, that was a really good song too. It Matters to Me. There was one album that was released this month that I liked. It's Patty Loveless, The Trouble with the Truth. Patty Loveless, definitely a great singer. She was one of those. She came out in like I think it was late 80s, and with a little more of a poppier sound, even though she was, I believe she is related to Loretta Lynn, I believe. I don't know exactly how, but I know I'm pretty sure they're related. But it's not like she ever came out the whatever of Loretta Lynn, it wasn't like something that was advertised, But anyway, she came out with like kind of more poppier stuff, even though it was still country. But then as the 90s went on, it got more and more country, and then she started doing more bluegrass, and just one of those voices, her and Vince Gill, whenever they do, especially When I Call Your Name, those two blend so well. But this was her 8th studio album. It was certified platinum. Included the singles You Can Feel Bad, the one You Can Feel Bad If It Makes You Feel Better, Don't Worry I'm Not Gonna Sing, I'll Shut Up Right Now. That's not the words, obviously. But anyway, that went to number 1. 1,000 Times a Day went to number 13. Lonely Too Long was another number 1, another great song. She Drew a Broken Heart, that was number 4. I'm surprised that wasn't number 1. I remember hearing that song more than any of the other ones. And then the title track, The Trouble with the Truth, went to number 15. So, big album there for Patty Loveless. She wouldn't have too much more time at the top of the charts like this, before the more popular stuff came along. But, during this time, she was still, played all the time on the radio. But like before, I was talking about, the kids' meal toys. Got a lot to mention because, I have to look these up. Obviously, I'm not going to remember, I remember what the Happy Meal toy was in January 96. Because usually I wasn't getting any freaking kids' meal toys. I heard, if we ever get to go out and eat, it was, whatever Marky Fo got us. It certainly wasn't a kids' meal. But, so that's why I got to do research on these. But, of course, you got to start with the one everybody thinks of, McDonald's and the Happy Meal. They had VR Trooper toys. If you don't know what that is, it's a Saban show, which is Power Rangers. But, I used to watch this all the freaking time, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later. But love VR Troopers, and they came out with these weren't actually like action figures from it because they wanted you to buy those in the store, but these are like different gadgets that the VR Troopers would use on the show. I think there's like 4 of them. Burger King came out with the Glow Force toys. This is when they were really pushing hard the BK Kids Club, or I don't even know if they were calling it BK then. I think it was just the Burger King Kids Club then. Where they had those kids that were like, they were trying to get, because everybody recognized Ronald McDonald and Grimace and all those, the Hamburglar. But Burger King had these like group of kids, and they were fictional. They weren't like actual actors or anything. They were just cartoons, I think. I don't think they ever had actors that played them. I think it was just cartoons. But anyway, they were trying to push that big as like, kids identifying with these kids. But anyway, these were, the Glow Force toys were just like glow-in-the-dark versions of the Burger King Kids Club members. Wendy's had the Club Cave toys. These were like prehistoric toys, like cavemen and dinosaurs and stuff like that. KFC, one of my favorites, had Casper the Friendly Ghost toys. And these were based on the animated series, Casper the Friendly Ghost. They had characters like Casper, obviously, and his weird uncles, and then a couple others from the show or cartoon. Speaking of cartoon, Taco Bell came out with Ace Ventura toys based on the Ace Ventura cartoon, which I know almost everybody knows Ace Ventura movie, but unless you're from my time period, you probably didn't even know it had a cartoon. There was a time when Jim Carrey had on the air 3 cartoons based on his movies, and I think Ace Ventura was the only one that actually was able to use his likeness. I don't know what it had to do with some kind of rights or something. Anyway, at one time on the air, there was an Ace Ventura cartoon, a Dumb and Dumber cartoon, which I've never seen, and the Mask cartoon, which I've seen that. I've seen that in Ace Ventura. Of course, nowhere near as good as the movies. A lot of those animated ones, with the exception of Beetlejuice. I love Beetlejuice. I didn't even really care for the Beetlejuice movie. Sorry. A lot of people are going to hate me for that. But I love the cartoon. But anyway, these toys were based on the animated series. They had the Rainforest Runaway Launcher. And each of these toys came with an Ace Ventura character in a different colored Hawaiian shirt. But this one is Ace in a limo. Then they had the Unpredictable Breakaway Ball with an Ace figure. Nesting pets, like those nesting things where you have a toy inside of a toy inside of a toy. Well, this is the big giant Ace Ventura head with different animals in there, and each animal had another toy inside of it. Just weird stuff. and For the Birds Bird Feeder, which is a bird feeder with Ace Ventura character. My dog's messing with I'll pull my TV over, I swear. But the last one is Hardee's. This was back when it was still Hardee's before they got bought out by Carly Jr. Stupid Carl's Jr. Ruined my Hardee's. They had the BMX Rad Riders, featuring like extreme sports, like pullback cars and stuff like that. Like there was like a rollerblader, skateboarder, surfer, that type of stuff. Of course, that BMX stuff was really big then. My brother Josh and Travis, he was a little younger, but he was still into it too. The whole trick bike thing, with the bike with the pegs on it. I mean, that was a big thing, like getting more pegs. And I didn't, I was from the generation before, even though me and my brother Josh are 5 years apart, it still felt like a whole generation because I love mountain bikes. I looked at a bike as a fun thing to ride, a way of transportation. And if I'm going up a hill, I want to be able to use the gears to help me get up the hill. He looked more at bikes as, the extreme stuff. He was definitely more into Tony Hawk and skateboarding than me. So, he was looking at, doing all the tricks, and, the pegs on the back were a big part of that. And that was a huge culture thing there from the mid 90s to about the early 2000s or somewhere there. Like, getting these custom pegs on, and these just, it's a whole, thing, it seemed like it was like you were on the mountain bike side or you're on the BMX bike side. And I never really cared for the BMX bikes because they were always smaller and there was no gears on them. So it was, anyway, like I said, my brother Josh, and then, Travis followed more him because he was, to him, Josh was the next oldest brother, He was more like, those two were like inseparable for a time. And they were, I guess they were closer in age. They were 3 years apart. So, I guess that they were sort of in the same, I don't know. Because, by the time I was in, I think Josh was in, I can't remember if Josh went to school when I was in if he was in elementary school at the same time I was. I would think he was. If it was, I think he was in kindergarten then. And then I moved on to middle school. But those two were in the same elementary school for a time period. And, of course, in this, middle school and high school. But anyway, the BMX, the extreme type sports, like, I said, with skateboarding. And that's when they, I don't remember when ESPN came out with the X Games, but it was somewhere around this time. That stuff started becoming really popular, I like the Tony Hawk games. I'm not good at them. I probably would like them more if I was. But, Josh and Travis were all over those things. I mean, they could do all the tricks on there. I just had a bunch of buttons and couldn't ever do the freaking, 900s and all those things and figure out how to do the specials and all that stuff. But, yeah, BMX was definitely huge then. Alright, guys. Full disclosure, about halfway through the podcast, I take a small break just to rest my voice a little bit. And I was just looking through Facebook a little bit, and I actually came upon the, I don't know if you can see it on there, but thing for the Happy Meal 2026 lineup. And I was all prepared to go, oh boy, what are they going to have? Shark, baby shark, or whatever. I don't even know what's popular anymore with kids, but 12 months of that or something. But there's actually some on here that seem interesting. I probably won't get them, but goat, whatever that is, it's capitalized. I don't know what goat is. Farm animals. That's January to February. February to March is Pokemon cards 30th anniversary. I was never into Pokemon, but if that's something you're into, it's definitely something worth checking out. Then March, the Amazing Digital Circus. No clue what the heck that is. March to April is Hoppers. Again, no clue. I'm sure people out there, oh my god, Hoppers. I don't know. Hop to it, I guess. In April, the Super Mario Galaxy movie. I'm guessing that comes out in April, or at least the toy for this does. But I wonder what they're, what it is. If it's Mario figures or who knows. Then we got April to May, the Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. Ugh. I've seen bits and pieces of that thing. That thing sucks. Sorry. Then in May, The Mandalorian and Grogu. My wife's going to go nuts over that, I guarantee you. I guarantee we're going to be getting Happy Meals that month. And then Pet Simulator, May to June. Who knows what that's going to be. June is Toy Story 5, obviously based on the upcoming Toy Story movie. June to July, Marvel Studios, Marvel Television. Like, I cannot stand those freaking Marvel, DC, all that stuff. Like, none of it interests me. I'm sorry. I like Batman the animated series and X-Men the animated series in the 90s, and the late 80s to through the 90s Batman movies. But that's about it for me in superheroes. I'm sorry, I can't stand it. July to August is Minions 3. Another one. My wife's just gonna be getting Happy Meals. Oh, I'm gonna get one this month. August to September, Sonic the Hedgehog / Hello Kitty. Well, I know one of my kids is going to get in the Hello Kitty ones. I'm going to get the Sonic the Hedgehog. September to October, Forgotten Island, whatever that is. I forgot it already, I guess. And then October to November, The Cat in the Hat. I don't know why The Cat in the Hat's like, you gotta have it. But anyway, I'm going to try to save the picture. It wouldn't let me, so I'm going to screenshot it. Love my screenshots. It's a nice tool when you got trolls that send death threats, but that's another one. Hi, Snakey. I'm sure you're stalking this, waiting for a mention. There you go. Now you can go back and tell Mommy you got a mention on the podcast. Congratulations. Check out my Facebook if you don't know what I'm talking about with that. Anyway, back to the podcast now. Speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario video games, there was really none of note or any systems that came out this month to really talk about, like that I liked or ever played. But there's one I want to talk about that actually came out a couple months prior to this. And the only reason I'm talking about it is because I just bought... anyway, it's called You Don't Know Jack. If you've ever heard of that series, of course it was... it's more popular now. Everybody knows it as the Jackbox games now instead of just You Don't Know Jack. Yeah, but I believe it was like September 95 the very first one came out. And it's a computer game, and it's one of them ones where there's a lot of innuendos in it, but it's never like a dirty game where only adults can play. You can choose to screw people in the game, but they show a screw. It's not actually screwing people. But it's just this fun set of games that they've come out with over the years, where it's set around like a fictional, like you're on a fictional game show. And you can play against a computer, play solo, or you can play against other people. But you just play it on the computer. Like I said, the very first one came out in September of '95, and I literally just bought. They put it on sale. I think it was like the first 11 of them, minus the ones that were like internet only because the servers are down for those, so they didn't bother putting those out on this. But yeah. The original one and the first few of those, and then like there's like one about television, one about sports. I think it was like I paid $5 for all like 11 games, like because I've loved the classic You Don't Know Jack games, and I've been wanting to get them for a while, but obviously I can't just even if I found it at Goodwill, I guarantee you I'm not gonna put it in my computer and it work. It's made to work on I guarantee Windows 95 or even earlier than that. But I don't like the newer games, the one that they always call the Jackbox games, because they're all, and it's not just because you use your phone and all this other stuff, but it's just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be as fun as this. It seems to be like, I don't know, just like last, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but I was talking about board games, how they used to be, I think it was a week before, board games used to be more, just different variety, more entertaining, more imaginative. Nowadays, as you get like the same, not the same, but pretty much the same, like 900 different variations of Cards Against Humanity, and not even just that game, just other games that are just like that, where you get these cards and you got to make a funny sentence and everybody votes on it. It's like, well, I don't know. When I play a board game, I like board games where, even if it's just luck, like, Trouble or, that's one that's mostly just luck. The roll, not the roll of the dice, the pop of the dice. But I like games like that. where you're going to win. You're based on whatever happens in the game, not if I don't make a funny enough person, or maybe you're playing with people and these two are best friends and of course they're going to vote for each other. It's you play a video game or a board game or anything, you don't play for votes. I mean, what is this, an election? Anyway, you can tell I don't really care for those. They're funny, ha ha ha, for like parties and stuff every once in a while, but that's about it. Give me Monopoly, give me Life, give me Sorry, any of those over Cards Against Humanity any day. But anyway, you don't know Jack. Apparently I don't. You're probably like, it's the best game ever. Well, whatever. It's just a game they come out with so you can say dirty things and make all this. And like I said, it's probably fun to play every once in a while. But it seems like everything they come out with is just ripping that concept off. Like we had one with the kids. It's probably after this came out, where they had these like funny, like big. It was made for to play with kids. Like there's like a monkey with like a banana, or that don't sound funny, but if you've seen I don't know, for some reason it always pops in my head, but the monkey's face was funny. Or there's like a kid like holding his nose, and you come up with funny, and you pick the things, that's, like I said, stuff like that is fun. But when every game becomes that, it's just so repetitive. And I look forward to, I haven't even downloaded it yet. I'm actually going to play these later today. Not all of them probably. But, start to play some of these You Don't Know Jack games with my wife on the computer. And, I'm just going to be fun to go through them. Because, like I said, I've only played, like, a couple of these. So it's going to be fun to see all the different ones. And it's a really, really fun series of games that I wish would get back to less, phones and play with this, and just, more straightforward video game type thing. Anyway, one of my favorite things to talk about is, you're probably like, everything, is wrestling. And 1996, was a pivotal year for wrestling. Of course, 95 is known as one of the worst years ever of wrestling, creatively, financially, what have you. 96 was the year where things started to change. Of course, they wouldn't fully change till we get till, around the end of the next year. But January did start that ball rolling. We start off talking about ECW's Super Show, because they didn't have pay-per-views then. They had these Super Shows that they would have, and then they would break the stuff down in that over the next couple weeks of what they called, their TV show was called Hardcore TV, which was, you had to find what channel it was on. It wasn't in every, it wasn't like it was every city in America. 96, I probably, if I didn't know about ECW then, other than PWI magazine, I was just, being turned on to them, because, I never even, it was on channel 25 locally, WBQC, if that station still exists, but I didn't even know about it at first. Like I said, I'd probably seen and read stuff about it in PWI magazine, but probably didn't give it too much thought, because it's never something I was able to even watch. So I probably was like, it was like the Japanese stuff. It's like, okay, who cares about the results? I'll read it and move on. But anyway, on January 5th, they had their it was the first ECW house parties from the ECW arena, and some significant things happened on this show. RVD defeated Axel Rotten by pinfall, and it was actually RVD's very first ECW match, which, of course, he would be like one of the ones you think of when you think of ECW. You think of Tommy Dreamer, you think of him, Taz, the Sandman. I mean, there's others, but Shane Douglas. But when you think of those top names, when you hear ECW and you think of wrestlers, those are the ones you think of. But yeah, RVD started there. Too Cold Scorpio with Woman defeated ECW TV champion Mikey Whipwreck to win the title. Sabu with Paul E. Dangerously pinned Stevie Richards with the Blue Meanie. And then in the main event, the Public Enemy defeated the Gangstas in a tag team street fight. And this was actually Public Enemy's last match in ECW until 1999. They went the WCW, didn't last there long, because outside of ECW, where Public Enemy's big thing was they came out with the music and they had the tables. Well, that's fine for ECW where there's no disqualifications basically, but WCW, they didn't work out. And then it went to WWF and acted like they knew everything until Bradshaw and Ron Simmons put them in their place and beat the crap out of them. But yeah, they were just didn't do very well, and then came back to ECW in '99. This show was also the return. I'm trying to say actually and also. I give up. Also, there we go. Actually, also is now a word called also. Anyway, Shane Douglas returned from WWF for his run of Dean Douglas and that debacle. But Shane Douglas was of course the famous incident before he left to go to the WWE. He threw down the NWA title and declared himself the ECW World Champion, and that was kind of when they started to go from Eastern Championship Wrestling to Extreme Championship Wrestling. But this month was no WCW pay-per-views this month, but there was a big WWF pay-per-view, was the Royal Rumble. It was the 9th Royal Rumble. It was January 21st from Fresno, California. And got some notes for the show, obviously. Goldust with Marlena defeated WWF Intercontinental Champion Razor Ramon to win the title. Shawn Michaels won the Royal Rumble that year. He came out 18th. I think it was the year before where he... did he win from first? I can't remember. That might have been. But anyway, in this one, he last eliminated Diesel. And he was the only other person at the time to win not only a second Royal Rumble, but back-to-back Royal Rumbles. Before that was Hogan, of course. Stone Cold's done it 3 times. I believe there might be one more that's done it 3 times. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I know Stone Cold was the first one to win it 3 times in a row. Not all back-to-back, but still. Then, of course, Shawn Michaels would go on to win the WWF title at WrestleMania 12. That classic Iron Man match against Bret Hart. This is actually one of the few times the Royal Rumble wasn't the main event of the show. There was still a WWF title match. I think later on they realized that the Rumble is, even though the title is supposed to be the biggest thing there, the Rumble is the draw of the show. You could announce literally nobody in that Rumble. And actually, I think that might actually draw more people because everybody loves those surprises. Of course, that wasn't happening then. There were surprises, but nothing like now, where they'll bring back legends or people make a debut with the company or people come up from NXT or TNA, whatever. But I think they could market the Royal Rumble and not mention anybody that's going to be in it, and I think it would actually be more exciting. But anyway, this was, like I said, one of the few times it wasn't the main event. Triple H was the first entrant in the match and lasted the longest. He lasted 48 minutes. He was the Iron Man of it. And then we got the one who came out number 30th and lasted the shortest amount of time. Good. 1 minute and 11 seconds was Duke the Pedo Dumpster Droese. Yeah, Duke Droese, whatever his real freaking name is, has recently been exposed. I don't know if he had relationships or was sending pictures or something to minors, but screw that nasty piece of crap. He don't deserve any more of my freaking time. Hi, Snakey. And this was actually, you think of it now as just being just a part of everything, but this was actually the first Royal Rumble where people came out to their own entrance music. If you remember, probably the greatest, everybody's favorite Royal Rumble of all time was the 92 one when Ric Flair won and then the title was on the line. In that match, the WWF title, I just famously remember him coming out and there's like sound of cowbells. I don't know if it was someone in the crowd had one, but I just remember that like being the sound that people came out to. But yeah, it's hard to believe there was a time when people would come out to the Royal Rumble and not have their music playing. It's such a huge thing, you get the countdown and everybody counts down and you hear the and then you wait and then you hear the music and then you see the Tron. That's how it is now. Back then it was just, come out. They finally figured it out in 96, entrance music, get people pumped. That's the whole point of the entrance music. But anyway, The main event actually was The Undertaker. With Paul Bearer, he defeated WWF champion Bret Hart by disqualification. Of course, title doesn't change hands, so Bret kept the title. But Diesel attacked Undertaker during the match, which of course would set up their WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 12. But there's a few other title changes that happened this month before we move on. Raven defeated ECW champion Sandman January 27th at a live event, which is untelevised. Macho Man Randy Savage defeated WCW World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair to win the title January 22nd on Nitro. And then on the very next Nitro, Conan defeated WCW US Champion One Man Gang to win the title. And I should say on that January 22nd Nitro, there's also another title change. Sting and Lex Luger defeated WCW World Tag Team Champions Harlem Heat to win the titles. But yeah, it's a little bit about wrestling. I was definitely watching it then. More WCW than anything, definitely. And this is about 3 or 4 months before NWO started. As I said, Diesel and Razor Ramon were on this show. Of course, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, they would, starting I think in March or April. No, I think it was April or May, June, July. No, it was either April or May when Scott Hall made that first appearance on WCW Nitro. They left right after WrestleMania. They famously asked Vince for more money, and Vince couldn't give it to him. Especially after everything going on. So they went and got guaranteed money in WCW, and then the NWO came along, and WCW was, number one for a while. Yeah, but I was mostly watching WCW then. Mostly the WCW Saturday night. Didn't really get to watch much of Nitro because Marky Foe was always on the TV then, and of course, he wouldn't let us watch nothing we wanted. But, this being 1996, not just starting since I started this podcast, but just whenever I look back in general, I always think of 1996 as like probably my favorite year of the 90s. I said I was, let me go up because I can't remember was I 11 or 12? I was 12 at the time. I thought so. Yeah, I was 12 at the time. So, when I'm from the 80s, obviously, I was born in 83, but I always think of myself as more of a 90s person than 80s because I was, 6 at the end of the decade. Well, actually, I turned 7 because my birthday's literally the last week of the year almost. But, so that was the oldest I was just starting 7 years old. So you don't have many core memories from that time period. Usually that stuff is like 10 to 20 is where you get your core memories of being younger, usually. And for me, that was the 90s. That's why I decided to do this podcast. Maybe if I ever complete all the years of the 90s, I may do I'm not going to do a month by month of the 80s, but I may do a year, a whole year in a podcast. Obviously, I'm not going to do a 12-hour thing, just kind of, go through some of the highlights of it, obviously. But anyway, 1996 was probably my favorite year for different reasons. It felt like it was kind of like a transitioning period where, life was progressing. We're getting to stuff like, we didn't have internet in the house, but, that was becoming popular. You can go on the computer and talk to people and look up stuff, and, before you just typed on it and did, the stuff that business people had. But, but at the same time, it felt like you were still connected to the early 90s, gateway back to the 80s and beyond, past, where things weren't as fast as they would be, obviously, nowadays. But it just felt like I don't know. I just look back, and it's probably just nostalgia looking back. But, it felt like a really nice place to be was 1996. I know there was crime and all this other stuff. I'm not saying, like it was back in the 60s where you could leave your doors unlocked and all the, Andy Griffith days. But to me, like when I look back, I just look back so fondly at this year. There was, I started the 6th grade this year. Well, I should say the year before. It was in January, so we were like in our second half of the year, getting used to being in middle school. A lot of people call a lot of people's schools is junior high. Ours is called middle school. and we started there in 6th grade. I know some schools, they start, elementary school is 6th grade. But in ours, it was 6th, 7th, and 8th was middle school. But yeah, just learning, all the classrooms, and, we're in there, before in elementary school, we were there with, and I was only at the elementary school, Norwood View, for 2.5 years, because we moved there in the middle of 3rd grade. So it wasn't like I'd, been lifelong friends with everybody that was in that school anyway. I just, started making friends there, when I didn't weird everybody out with just being me. But, yeah, in middle school, there was I think it was 4 other schools that, besides Norwood View, that made up the middle school, and then, of course, the high school. So, you're around mostly all new people. You'll get maybe a couple people in, in each class. And that's another thing, is all the different classes. You're in this class for this period, then you move on to this one, but it's not always the same people. You might have a class with 3 or 4 classes with one person. They're not in this class. And it was just, the school was bigger. It was literally a mile away, and we had to walk because there was no buses, because everybody was within walking distance. So they're like, you don't need buses. Literally, the only time there was buses is when we had field trips, which wasn't even that many times. But just learning the school, and I had made a friend named Nick, and Marky Fo actually let him come over a few times, surprisingly. I remember one time, it was the New Year's Eve party, which I don't know if I've talked about. I need to look this up real quick to see if I've talked about December 95, because I think I've mentioned this New Year's Eve party. It's infamous in our family, because we had this, homeless people were literally showing up. Marky Fo was so drunk, just anybody was wandering in off the street, and, they could have robbed us blind or done who knows what. But Marky Fo wasn't paying attention. Wasn't like he had a good heart, he just didn't pay attention. No, I have not done it. I can't wait till I talk about that. Although I can talk about it now. It's January 96. Technically, the new year started that day. But yeah, we had this huge party, as he, normally he'd go out to drink and take us to the bar sometimes, or just leave us home once I was old enough to watch everybody, which we all enjoyed, because we weren't ever allowed to go outside or do anything. So whenever Marky Fo was at work or out at the bar, it was party time, pretty much. But yeah, like I said, the New Year's Eve party. First of all, I got, for Christmas that year, I got a stereo system, which was it wasn't a CD. I didn't get a CD player with it, sadly, but it was a dual cassette deck with a radio, and those detachable speakers, where they hooked to it, but I could take them off, and surround sound for then. But and I also got Garth Brooks's Fresh Horses, which was his latest album, and me and him, that's why we became friends, is discussing Garth Brooks, because not many of us country listening people there at Norwood Middle School. It was always the pop stuff, or rock, or rap, or what have you. But, not many of us country listeners, but he was definitely one of them. He listened to other stuff too, before I did. But, we bonded over Garth Brooks, basically. Over and spend the night, and I think we spent the night in the basement, it was like a sleepover or something instead of upstairs, I guess. I don't know why. Because if I remember, I had my own room then. I think. Yeah, I can't remember. There was a time period where I had my own room. Anyway, but for some reason we were in the basement, because I think there was other kids over. There was, we called them our cousins, but they weren't really. They were just Marky Fo's friends. But anyway, they were upstairs having this party with all this stuff. We got to take some food down there, luckily, some chips and dip, but it's probably all we got. But I'm sure Marky Fo made something loaded with mushrooms, because he was obsessed with those freaking things, and all his freaking bull crap. But they had these pickled herring, the nasty fish, and we always call them pickle herries. But anyway, this guy came over, and his name was Ralphus. This is the homeless guy. And the only other Ralphus I'd ever heard of that name is the guy from WCW with Chris Jericho, if you remember that whole thing. Ralphus was this guy that worked on the ring crew, but then Chris Jericho had him as his security guard. It's so hilarious. He was bald and fat and snaggletooth, and it's me if I didn't have hair. I'm turned into Ralphus. But anyway, this guy literally ate all these pickled Harries and was farting all freaking night, passed out at the table, like trying to get cereal in the morning, and his head was on the table. Like, this party was insane. And we were downstairs listening to my new stereo and dancing. That's another thing we did. I would come up with these Friday night dance parties, and me and my brothers, and like I said, those kids that we called cousins, but they weren't. There's one named Rick, but there was another one who was his actual cousin named Brandon. And he called it his I don't forget what his last name was, but it started with a B. He's like, said, "I'm Brandon B." And I swear this kid was like 10, but it looked like he had a full mustache and like this black hair, and his dancing was standing there. Like, he would go like this. You can't see me. Rub his stomach. He's just standing there dancing like that. He looked like some demented version of like Billy Ray Cyrus. But I would host these Saturday night and Friday night dance parties where we would listen to music and just think, I don't even know what it was. We weren't like dancing with each other, like slow dancing. We just like I don't know, because I'd always watched, being a country fan, the TNN. The Nashville network, they would have the Wild Horse Saloon, where they'd have like an hour of people just like dancing, and they would play music obviously during it, some of the latest songs and stuff, but they'd be dancing, and we had our own version of that basically. But anyway, and I also remember calling the request line. If everybody remembers that from the 90s, that'd be like the highlight. You call in and request a song, especially when there's times where you could call in. There would be set times during the night where you'd call in, and sometimes you would get to talk on the air, which would be the most amazing things. Other times you would record like, this is blah 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 from blah blah blah. I want to hear, and then they'd play the recording. But there'd be sometimes you'd actually get to talk to the DJ. That was fun. I remember one time they did a countdown, like I think top 9 at 9 on, I don't know if it was every night or just the weekends or something. But anyway, they would have people call in, and if you're the lucky caller, you would get to introduce the song. But I remember I got to do that one night, and I couldn't remember who it was, but I couldn't say the name right like 3 times. I finally got it right, luckily. I didn't think they were going to use me. But anyway, it was fun having Nick over. The stupidest reason why we stopped being friends, though, I think it was even before the year was out. Okay, there was this gym teacher that we were like in love with, and I know you're like, gym teacher, because everybody thinks that the gym teacher is like this, even if it's a female gym teacher, it's like not something you would think that teenage boys would have a crush on, but literally every teenage boy in that school had a crush on this thing. Or Mrs. Kazmaier, sorry if you're listening to me. By the way, it broke all our hearts. She ended up marrying the 6th grade science teacher. It wasn't one of my science teachers, but still, I hated him. Like, you married our girl. Anyway, the dumbest thing, we literally got into a fight, an actual fist fight, because we were fighting over the gym teacher. I don't remember exactly what all it entailed, but that's what I remember of it, is we got into a fist fight over the gym teacher. I think we each punched each other once in the face, and that was it, and we literally never spoke again. I don't know if I can even find him on Facebook. If you're out there, Nick Miller, I know it seems like a common name, but his name was Nick Miller. If you're out there, contact me. I'm sorry about the gym teacher. Neither one of us is going to have a shot with her anyway. And if we would have, it would have been a crime on her part anyway. So, but as a kid, you don't think that. You don't, like, oh, I'm in love with this person. You don't think of like logistics. Like, none of us were actually thinking like, well, I might actually have a relationship with her. It was just dumb stuff. But yeah. That's why we weren't friends anymore. Something had something to do with the gym teacher. Of all the stupid things. Speaking of stupid things, back then you couldn't just keyboard warrior and run your mouth online like some people do. Back then, if you said stuff in person, there was consequences. And I learned that the hard way because there was consequences for me. I can't remember what I said to this kid. And by kid, I mean this guy was giant. I'm not just talking about his weight. Like, he was like a mat tall, like... And for some reason, I don't even remember what I said, but you'd think someone was like a foot and a half almost taller than me, because I'm pretty sure he failed 6th grade more than once. You would think that I wouldn't even mouthing off to him. We were friends at one point, but I can't remember what I did. But I'd said something, it was like during homeroom, like before the teacher even got in there. It was so early in the day. But the next thing I know, I am literally picked up, and I wasn't fat or anything then, like some people like to call me every day of their life, and that's all they do is call me fat online, keyboard warrior, snake boy. Anyway, he picked me up and threw me over like 3 or 4 freaking desks. And I got up off the floor just as the teacher came in, and he looked at me, and I wasn't going to tell anyway, but I mean, the look he gave me was like, you say a word. I'm not saying nothing. And we never spoke again, but at least I learned my lesson from that. But yeah, that's just crazy stuff that went on in the 90s. Everybody had, of course, their morning routine, especially when they're like 12 years old. I would get up at 6 in the morning, and TBS would have the Munsters on. I'd either watch that, or on Nickelodeon, I would watch Mr. Wizard's World. Depending on the day, it was depending on what I'd watch. But especially in January, I would get up, I would get me a bowl of cereal, get my blanket, and really sit on the heat register with a blanket over it, so I can keep myself warm, and eat cereal and watch either the Munsters or Mr. Wizard's World. Before I got to walk up to school at I got to leave at 7:15 or something to get there at 8, because it was literally a mile, and it was uphill both ways. We went over this hill, and then coming back, we had to go over the same hill. It was literally a mile away. But and then 6th grade, sometimes I was going to my friend Mike's house. We were friends in elementary school, and we would watch VR Troopers in the morning before we would go. I'd just stop in there before we went to school. And then, of course, after school routines were a big thing, too. I'd come home. Boy Meets World was in syndication then, so I'd watch that from 3 to 4, or it was 3:30 to 4:30, something like that. But I'd get a bowl of cereal then. It's bowl of cereal in the morning, bowl of cereal as soon as I get home from school. Like clockwork. I'm sure you guys have memories of your own stuff then. But, of course, Saturday mornings, everybody was watching Saturday morning cartoons, especially then. And that's kind of a good segue into the next part. I'm going to give a look at the lineups of the Saturday morning cartoons and the Nickelodeon lineup for January 6th. And this is the first Saturday of the year. So we'll see what was going on with the Saturday morning cartoons. We'll start with ABC. We got The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which I'd never really watched. Free Willy, a cartoon based on the movie. Never seen that. Speaking of what I was talking about before, Dumb and Dumber cartoon. Didn't like the movie. I guarantee I wouldn't have liked the cartoon. Bump in the Night, never watched that. Fudge. Never even heard of that. Reboot, whatever that is. I'm sure not like the 50,000 reboots I have today. Sorry, I need a drink. My voice is kind of getting the... Well, sorry if you hear me sniffle and everything. Like I said, still getting over whatever this is. Then we got the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show. Can't go wrong with that. Of course, you got to get your combination of Looney Tunes in there. There's always... Seems like... I've never done one of these lineups, Nickelodeon or Saturday morning cartoon, where I didn't see some version of Looney Tunes on there. There's a show called What a Mess. Don't know what that is. Moving on to CBS, The Adventures of Hyper Man. Never heard of that. Then we got The Lion King's Timon and Pumbaa, which was, animated series based on that, those two characters, which, ended up being, the biggest characters from The Lion King. They always annoyed me, it seemed. They were okay in the movie, but I never watched the series. Disney's Aladdin, obviously another one based on... As you see at this time, there's a couple Disney things right in a row on CBS, and you're thinking, what the heck? I thought they were the ABC. They wouldn't be... That'd be like having Disney stuff on Paramount these days. Because Paramount owns CBS. I think that's the way it goes, unless CBS owns them. Anyway, and obviously ABC is owned by Disney. But this is before then, so, you know, Disney actually let their stuff go on other channels before they became all, oh, we can't have that. But anyway, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon was still going on. I'm not sure if they were on new episodes or not. They might have been, but they were definitely showing them in the mornings. And these kids, we don't care. We've seen the same episode like 10 times. It's new to us. Or if it's not like we've seen it a million times. It's not like today where you can, you know, have the whole thing either on DVD or streaming, and you can watch it anytime you want. And like, oh, I've seen this one. You know, back then it was, you know, you catch it when it's on, and, you know, sometimes you miss an episode, you don't ever get a chance to see it again. But speaking of what I was talking about before, at 10, The Mask was on, the cartoon. Then another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode. Then The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. Never heard of that one. Santo Bugito. No Cluo. And then Beakman's World. Everybody's, of course, their favorite science thing is Bill Nye the Science Guy, it seems, from the 90s. Mine was Mr. Wizard's World, but there was also some that liked Beakman's World, too. And then we got Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego. I never really watched that. I love Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego on the PBS game show, but this is a cartoon. I never really got into it. Extravaganza. I didn't. The Cat, just, I don't know, something about him annoyed me. Like, it was a precursor to SpongeBob to me. Then we got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, one of the all-time greatest. I can't say enough about that show. I love that show. Then we got Masked Rider, sort of like another superhero thing, but I never really watched that. Spider-Man, the animated series, I watched a little bit. Then we got X-Men, the animated series. Like I said, I love that. Never watched the movies, never have an interest in them. Couldn't care less about any of the newer stuff, but the X-Men animated series was great. The Tick was right up there with Eek the Cat to me. So just stupid to me. And then Life with Louie. I love freaking Life with Louie. Cats lick the butter. Love that one. And then my chuckles turned to an eye roll when we look at NBC. They didn't care about kids. In fact, they didn't even start their... In 96, they didn't start their stuff aimed for younger people until 10, because they shoved the Today Show for a couple hours on Saturday. But they stopped caring about kids and went just to teens. And it seemed like they went to just people that like basketball. We got Saved by the Bell, the new class. Sucked. I love Saved by the Bell, but not the new class. And we got Hang Time. Another Saved by the Bell, the new class. And then California Dreams. No NBA inside stuff. They always shove that on there too. You can tell that ever since, you know, they stopped marketing to kids and started doing the teenager stuff, I don't know, it just, NBC sucked at Saturday morning cartoons. They weren't even cartoons. And then we got the WB, which was a newer one. They came out, they had Animaniacs, of course, legendary show. It was originally on Fox Kids, but once WB started, you know, the WB network, the Warner Brothers, I should say, started the WB network. Animaniacs went to there. We got another one. Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. Take another couple Looney Tune characters and put them in a show. Animaniacs again. Pinky and the Brain, which is, of course, was a small little short on Animaniacs that they turned into their own cartoon. Freakazoid, never watched that. And then Earthworm Jim, I never watched that either. But we're going to move on to Nickelodeon lineup now. And, of course, we start at midnight, which gives us, of course, Nick at Night. And we got some of the old classics. Bob Newhart Show, I Love Lucy. Followed by The Lucy Show. Followed by The Munsters. Like I said, I was watching that at 6 in the morning on TBS. In 96, I was not up at this time of night, so I wasn't watching at 1:30 in the morning. But then we got something from 2 to 4:30 called the Classic TV Countdown. It doesn't say what it is. I don't know if, exactly what that was. Maybe I'll look that up in the future. I don't look at these lines before I do it just so I can get my first thoughts on things. But maybe in the future, if that comes up again, I'll look it up. I know I'm talking forever on this one. I'm sorry. Then we got the Lucy Show again. And then at 5, we got 2 classics back to back here, Lassie and Flipper. They would sometimes show those during, in fact, there's another one coming up later on during actual Nickelodeon. Then at 6, like I told you, Mr. Wizard's World. See, I even remember the time. 6:30 was Flipper again. Then at 7, one of my all-time favorite game shows, Nick Arcade. They just don't make them like that anymore. Always wanted to be on that game show. Then at 7:30, another one I always wanted to be on, Family Double Dare. My favorite version of Double Dare was Family Double Dare. Then at 8, we get one of the original Nicktoons, Doug, followed by another one, Rugrats. Of course, there was 3 original Nicktoons, Rugrats, Doug, and Ren and Stimpy. But then we've got an hour of Muppet Babies. Man, I love that cartoon. Followed by Tiny Toon Adventures for an hour. Beetlejuice, the animated series. Salute Your Shorts and Hey Dude. Those two always go together to me. They're the teens that are either working at the Dude Ranch on Hey Dude for the summer, or they're going to summer camp. To me, those two go together. There should have been a crossover where, I don't know, somehow the camp was took a field trip or something to the ranch or something, and they get on there and get on each other's nerves. That would have been hilarious. Love to see freaking Budnick and Ted from Hey Dude, like they would have hated each other and tried to prank each other all day. Then we got My Brother and Me. Never really watched that. Here we go, Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Ooh, 2 o'clock, What Would You Do? Hosted by Mark Summers, of course, Double Dare. What Would You Do is more of a variety show. Followed with Wild and Crazy Kids, another sort of variety show. It was more of like outdoor sports activities. They're just like What Would You Do. There's not really like, well, What Would You Do? You did win prizes. Wild and Crazy Kids, I don't think they won any prizes. There was just like 3 hosts of the show, and they each got their own teams of like large amounts of kids, and they would like do all kinds of stuff outdoors. And we got 3 o'clock, my brother Josh's favorite, Wienerville, hosted by Mark Wiener. This crazy puppet show. This show was insane. And we got Beetlejuice again. And then at 4, we got Legends of the Hidden Temple, one of those classic Nickelodeon game shows that are just amazing. Followed by Global Guts at 4:30, which I'll talk a little bit about in a couple minutes here. And then we got The New Land of the Lost, which was the 90's version of that show, not the 70's. I couldn't stand the 70's version. It was stupid to me. And the Will Ferrell movie was based on that version. It sucked. But I love the 90's show. Then we got Clarissa Explains It All. Man, talk about 90's Nickelodeon. I love that freaking show. We got Doug again. Rocko's Modern Life, another Nicktoon. Followed by another great Nicktoon, Ah Real Monsters. That thing was crazy. Disney's just monsters straight up ripped off that. The whole concept of monster school and these crazy monsters and a thing made for kids. They straight up just ripped it off. Rugrats again. And then, of course, being Saturday night, there was Snick. We got the Secret World of Alex Mack, which I was never really a big fan of. All that. I loved all that. This version of it. As it got later into the 90's, I didn't care as much about it. Then we got classic, and we get two episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? No Ren and Stimpy tonight, but that's fine. If you give me 2 episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, I'll forgive the no Ren and Stimpy. But we got the Tale of the Chameleons and the Tale of Station 109.1. I remember that one. I don't remember the Tale of Chameleons. I've probably seen it, but I just don't remember off the top of my head. But I do remember the Tale of Station 109.1. And then, of course, then at 10 o'clock, we hand it back to the adults. We go back to the Nick at Night, I Love Lucy, The Lucy Show, and the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. It was definitely a Lucy night, apparently. But before we still have a few more things to talk about with TV. But I do want to mention the TGIF lineup. Of course, Friday nights. Family Matters was the big show, because they always put the main show on at 8 o'clock. They were in the 7th season. This is actually their last time in TGIF. Next year they would be on another night of the week, and then they'd end up moving to CBS for the final season. But Boy Meets World was always my favorite thing to ever come out of TGIF, and they were on the 3rd season. one of the standout episodes of that was in this month was where Mr. Feeney. It was after like Harley had left, the original school bully, had his little gang, and then I can't remember the other guy that like moved to take his place, but then there was Joey, the other, it was Frankie and Joey, the two little like underlings of the main bully. Well, I think Joey was gone by this point too, so like Frankie was all alone. So Mr. Feeney asked Corey and Sean to like take him under his wing, teach him how to be, like you guys. Because, I mean, not that Sean and Corey were, like, the goody-goodies of the school, but they're still better than the school bully. But anyway, it's a crazy episode, and it has Vader as Frankie's dad, who's been on there a couple times in that role before, but it's always funny to see him, and that love seeing Vader on Boy Meets World. Step by Step was in the 5th season. One of those episodes, speaking of wrestling, featured Frank and JT dressing up as women and wrestling women for Super Bowl tickets. And I should use wrestling in quotations. One of the things I hate, it's funny, but at the same time I hate it, is when they have a episode of a TV show with wrestling on it, or they include it in a movie, and it's just so, like being a huge wrestling fan, it's like, that's not anything near wrestling. First of all, the wrestling they were doing had 12 rounds. It's clearly wrestling doesn't have rounds like boxing. I mean, unless you're talking about amateur wrestling or something. But then, of course, it happened in a boxing ring, the ring with 4 ropes. Like, something like that, if you're not a wrestling fan, you're like, oh, yeah, they're wrestling. That's a wrestling ring. To me, like, it's not a wrestling ring. It's got 4 ropes. It's boxing. But anyway, and then the final show for TGIF was Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Season 4 out of 5, and I used to watch it all the time, but I haven't seen it in forever. I need to watch that again. But we'll talk about sports now. Of course, being January, the NFL playoffs had just started. They actually began December 30th, but we'll talk about it here. Of course, this being the 1995 NFL season. Bengals finished tied for second in the AFC Central, 7-9. So, sadly, that's one of our better years in the 90s. But this was actually the first season the Jaguars and the Panthers in the league. They were the expansion teams. And the last season for the Browns until 1999. Of course, that whole thing where the owner wanted to move the team, so they moved the team to Baltimore, but they actually kept the Browns name and like all the history of the Browns in Cleveland, and they would come back in 1999 and Baltimore would become the Ravens, and basically a new team, even though it was all the ownership of the Browns. Weird thing. I don't think anything like the sports like that's happened ever again since then or before then. But this is also the year that Los Angeles lost both of their teams. The Rams moved to St. Louis, so of course they're back now, and the Raiders moved back to Oakland, and of course then they moved. I think they might have moved back to Los Angeles. I can't remember. Or no, they stayed in Oakland, but now they're in Las Vegas. All these teams move around too much. But the playoffs, we'll go into them like round by round. For the AFC, the wild card round, the Colts defeated the Chargers, and the Bills beat the Dolphins. Then in the division round, the Colts upset the number 1 seed, the Chiefs. Good. And the number 2 seed, the Steelers, easily defeated the Bills. Then in the AFC Championship game, the Steelers beat the Colts. Can't stand the freaking Steelers. And for the NFC side of things, the Packers easily defeated the Falcons, and the Eagles got a massive 58-37 win over the Lions. Then the division round, the Packers beat the number 2 seed, 49ers, and then the number 1 seed, the Cowboys, defeated the Eagles. And then in the championship game, the Cowboys beat the Packers. So when we got Super Bowl 30 from Arizona, the Cowboys defeated the Steelers 27-17. Good. Ha ha ha, freaking Steelers. Hate you. Anyway, for the NCAA football, Tennessee defeated Ohio State 20-14 in the Florida Citrus Bowl. But that's okay, because the day this podcast comes out, actually, that night is going to, of course, New Year's Eve, is going to be the start of the second year back-to-back championships for Ohio State. We're going to freaking beat the crap out of Miami. I guarantee it's going to be a blowout. I'm Not just only going to win, we're going to blow them out. Guarantee it. I'm going to say it right here. Hopefully you watch this before that, and then you can get on here to either laugh at me, which you won't be, or say, yep, you knew it. But anyway, that was actually the year Eddie George won the Heisman Trophy. Of course, legendary running back for the Buckeyes, and then went on to have a great career for the Tennessee Titans, which was still the Houston Oilers at this time. I think next year would be the last year of the Oilers. But for college basketball, the championship game, the national championship, Nebraska defeated Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. But a couple more things to talk about TV-wise. I talked about Global Guts earlier. This was actually the last season. Our Guts would actually end this month. It was first known as Nickelodeon Guts, and then the last season became Global Guts. The only difference being is that they would regular Guts was just filmed, well, they were all filmed at Nickelodeon Studios, but it would just be 3 kids that came down there. But for Global Guts, it would usually be 1 American and then 2 from other countries. They'd have people from Russia, Mexico, European countries. But I always loved the freaking Guts. All the different activities. The host, Mike O'Malley, he annoys my wife because she's just so. But he was funny. The referee, Mo, her voice is always in my head. But such great memories of that show. And usually whenever they have it on or you see it somewhere like on YouTube or something, it seems to be like Global Guts, to where it makes it look like Global Guts was like the bigger thing. Like I said, it was only the last season. The first 3 seasons was just Guts, Nickelodeon Guts. And of course the ending where everybody climbs up the aggro crag, and of course the super mega aggro crag. It seems like every season the name grew and the size of the thing grew. But yeah, you'd have to climb up. They had 2 versions of this. The first one where they went on points, or they always go on points, but they'd have everybody start, and then wherever you finish, you get that amount of points for. And they, even if you got up there first, if you were dead last, and the person in first finished second, on the climbing the aggro crag, sometimes they would still win. So you wouldn't know until you're done. You got to calculate the points. So what they did in later seasons that made a lot more sense is based on point position, there would be like a head start. Like whoever was first in points gets started this time, and then second goes at this time, and third goes at this time. So that way, it was truly whoever got to the top won. Instead of having to figure out this, it was a lot better way to do it. I think American Gladiators did the same. Originally, they had, they did the points and then calculating, and then for that, the final obstacle course, which of course this is basically our American Gladiators for kids before they came out with American Gladiators for Kids actual show. But one final thing to talk about is a show that was in its first season at the time called The Drew Carey Show. And I'm going to talk about this because I've been binge watching it the last couple weeks, especially when I was sick and didn't want to do anything but just sit there. I would just sit and watch this. It's so easy to watch. The 22 minutes fly by, and you're expecting more. Come on, where's more episode? It never gets to a point. It's oh, this episode's kind of dragging. At least the ones I've watched haven't. And I'm almost to the end of season 2. But this show is revolutionary. They were doing dance numbers and stuff before anybody else was doing it. They would do a what's wrong with this episode, where they would have 150 different things that they had, the clock on the wall would go from one time to jump in the future, or something would be on the wrong side, or somebody would say something, Anyway, then the people watching the show were supposed to write in and write down everything they spotted wrong, and it was I can't remember what the contest was for, but I think when they showed the replays of the show later on, they did everybody remember from the 90s pop-up video on VH1. I love watching that. I watched that even though I didn't like the music, just because it would have so many facts that would pop up on screen, about the video in particular, or the artist, or a scene or whatever. Anyway, whenever they show the replays of these, what was wrong with this episode, they would have the things on screen telling you what was wrong. But they did live shows because of course Drew Carey was huge in the 90s. not only this, but the Whose Line Is It Anyway? You know, with the improv, especially with Ryan Stiles. But yeah, they would do the live shows, and they would have, you know, a script, but there would be some ad-libbing too, because there would be a bell ringing and at different parts, you know, because they'd memorize their script. But then if the producer or whoever, director, who it was, like, did the bell sound, they had to come up with a different line, all, you know, right now, right off the top of their head. And there was even one year where they did the live shows where they literally did one for each time zone, so that each show they did was, you know, obviously different. But the whole interaction between Drew Carey and Mimi and his stupid friends Oswald and Lewis and Kate with all her problems, and just, man, I'm going back and watch. You know, you think these shows like nostalgic, like it's not gonna hold up. This show holds up and more. Like, I'm enjoying it now even more than I did then, just because now I get even more jokes. But yeah, it was so hard to find this forever because of because they use so much music in it that sometimes there's even a couple episodes they've had to cut out because it was like all musical episodes and stuff. Or sometimes they'll go back and replace, you know, so they don't have to get rid of whole episodes. They'll replace a song that they use for like a dance number. But, you know, the dance numbers weren't always my favorite things on there. And I hate that other shows used them because they did it to annoying levels. But Drew Carey's show was ahead of its time. They ended up having 9 seasons, and towards the later years, I don't know if I've seen every episode, but I've seen most of them. But like I said, looking forward to it. I'm in towards the end of the 2nd season. It's on Tubi TV and probably a couple other ones, probably on the Roku. I don't know, but I know it's on Tubi TV, and they've got a YouTube channel now where they put a couple episodes on there and some interviews where they're going back and talking about it. It's a fun watch, but like I said, love the Drew Carey show. It was so innovative, and that's pretty much it for the week. Next week we're going to be on 60. I can't believe I'm on 60 episodes of these already. I started in I was trying to sound like a stupid Tim the Toolman Taylor ripoff. I think I started about October of last year, which would be 2024. And yeah, I believe that was the month and year I started, but we're on 60 of these. Next week we're going to go literally 1 year into the future. We're going to go to January of 1997. This will be my 7th trip through 97, so we almost got a full year's, you know, almost got a whole 1997 years worth. But at this time I was 13 years old and in my first year of 7th grade. And I've told that story before, but I'll probably tell it again next week if you don't know what I'm talking about. I apparently decided I needed 2 years to graduate the 7th grade because I'm an idiot. But anyway, that's next week, and we'll see you then.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, fateful haul of horror.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars.